Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. So how did you fare during the storm? I spent most of the morning, I'm recording on Monday in the afternoon. Most of the morning I spent cleaning up snow. But, it's to be expected. After all, we do live in Vermont. So hopefully everybody out there fared pretty well in the storm. And hopefully you were able to get shoveled out without too much effort. But there's a lot going on in the state, and I wanted to start off with an op-ed by a fellow Republican, Representative Rob North from Addison 3. Now, he has a blog post that he does on his website, and he also published this commentary in Vermont Daily Chronicle, January 26, 2026. North, no new taxes. This past Tuesday, Governor Phil Scott delivered the 2026 budget address to Vermonters and the General Assembly, saying the time for structural reform is now. With federal stimulus dollars winding down and revenue forecasts downgraded, Vermont faces a pivotal moment that demands discipline, innovation, and collaboration. The governor's proposed state budget is $9.4 billion, about 2% increase over last year. I had hoped the going-in position would be a reduced state budget given the cuts and uncertainties from the federal government and the recent news of a state revenue downgrade for the year. But at least the increase is modest and entirely organically funded. I agree with that statement 100%, ladies and gentlemen. I wish it was a decrease. The good news is that the governor is promising no new taxes and no increase in the gas tax. He is also promising to use $105 million from the general fund to buy down property taxes to get them below a 6% increase. Again, I feel this is insufficient. If you listen to the governor's address at the link above, you'll hear him very clearly call for school boards to reduce spending to further reduce property taxes. The buy-down is not quote, the buy-down is not provided so that school boards can increase spending, end quote, he said. Quote, it's intended for property tax reduction, end quote. My hope is that with Act 73 implementation on the horizon, school boards will be putting budgets on a glide slope towards the budgets they will be receiving when the foundation formula kicks in. Your vote in March matters. And let me see, he refers to his blog post. The rest of the governor's address discussed policy priorities which align well with those presented by Republican House leadership at our press conference last week. Vermonters spoke loud and clear in the 2024 election. Vermonters need relief, and they need it now. As we look into this 2026 session, my colleagues and I are proud to sponsor bills that, if passed, would bring much-needed relief to Vermonters' biggest concerns of affordability and public safety. Here are some examples. Housing and cost reduction. Property tax relief by freezing tax rates for the next 3 years, H774. That is sponsored by Representative Gina Galfetti. I know that for sure. Continue land conservation while preventing skyrocketing land cost, H70. Repeal the road rule permit requirement and extend Act 250 relief, H602. Require notification and property tax reduction act for 250 designation impacts, H730. Remove impact fees for properties subject to the 3-acre rule, H632. Healthcare and insurance cost reduction. Increase access to affordable insurance, H585. Increase choice of medical providers. That one is to be announced. But ladies and gentlemen, that was a big one. That's a very big one. I believe there was an interview with Senator Scott Beck where he outlined that, or he stressed that very heavily. Without bringing in more competition, allowing more competition inside this state, we're never going to drop the healthcare costs. We've got an aging population, and unless we can join a pool of larger people, meaning outside the borders of the state of Vermont, we're never going to have lower insurance. Everybody knows, ladies and gentlemen, anybody in business knows, the more options you have, the more price moderation and higher quality you're going to have. And guess what? That works with schools too. Education cost reduction and quality improvement. Implement foundation formula and delete class size minimums. H698. Energy cost reduction. Repeal or reform the very costly Global Warming Solutions Act, Affordable Heat Act, and the Renewable Heat Standard. Renewable Energy Standard. H62, H52, H289, H16, S68, and H159. These lower numbers, House numbers, by the way, bill numbers, they're from last session, ladies and gentlemen. Just so you know, the left, the political left, the progressive Democrat left, is stalling. They're dragging their feet. It's same stuff, different session, this session. Same stuff, different session. We have bills on the wall that are tacked to the wall. That the Democrat, progressive Democrat chairs have no intention of pulling off the wall and debating in committee. They do not want these passed out of committee. They do not want to lose control of their agenda. And these bills that I've cited will definitely help with affordability and public safety. Now, let me get back to the op-ed here. Transportation cost reduction. Eliminate unnecessary expensive vehicle inspection standards. H358, S105, S103. And, if I can plug my own bill, I have an annual safety inspection repeal bill. Just so that you would only have to inspect your vehicle when it transfers ownership or you bring it new to this state. Allow Vermonters to continue to buy non-electric cars and trucks, H65 and H503. Improve public safety. Increasing public safety accountability by imposing bail on repeat offenders, not just those who are a flight risk. And that one is to be announced. But this is on our minds. This is what we are trying to advance. And this public safety accountability by imposing bail on repeat offenders, that can be done as a committee bill. Not sure it will, but it can be done as a committee bill. This list is far from exhaustive, but captures some of the concrete solutions in bills that Republicans have already introduced or drafted to provide the solutions that Vermonters are demanding. House Republicans will continue to work tirelessly with the governor and our colleagues across the aisle and in the Senate to deliver these and other results for the state. Your vote in November matters. And it really does. And that's one of the reasons why I get behind this microphone, ladies and gentlemen, to inform people. I listed a lot of bill numbers. And if you want to go back and listen, you can listen to them. I'll try to list them all again very quickly, but there are a lot of them. And the reason I want to list them is because now for more than one session, last session and now this session, we as Republicans have put forth bills to deal with healthcare and insurance, education, energy cost reduction, transportation cost reduction, improving public safety, but they have not been pulled off the wall. They are not being debated. So let me give you a quick rundown. H774, H70, H602, H730, H632, H585, H698, H62, H52, H289, H16, S68, H159, H159, H358, S105, S103, H65, H503. These are bills aimed to make Vermont safer, more affordable, and I wanted to make sure that I listed them and read through this because there are plenty of people out there who are gaslighting you, telling you Republicans don't have solutions. That's not true. Republicans have solutions that are not given the light of day. They are not taken off the wall and discussed in committee and given a vote to find their way out onto the floor to advance to the Senate, or the Senate bills to advance to us. And it's very important that you understand this. This is why I do this, to make sure people don't get gaslit. There were plenty of press conferences that get a lot of press airtime, but they don't include any of the Republican agenda because we don't have the majority yet. When we get it, there'll be a different story. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood that with us being in the minority and not having the advantage of having chairmanships in enough committees so that we can decide what actually gets discussed in committee, then this is what we get stuck with. We have the opportunity only to try to make bad bills just a bit better. Just a bit better. So, and one of the things about making bad bills just a bit better, if I can find it real quickly, there's another. Just bear with me a second, ladies and gentlemen. I know that I can find it. I just want to, bear with me a minute here. I know I just saw it. Oh, bad bills, bad bills. Here we go. H545. This is by Allison Despathy, January 26, 2026, in Vermont Daily Chronicle as well. This is an open letter to the Vermont legislature. Dear Vermont representatives, there seems to be confusion on H545. Respectfully, I share a few thoughts for consideration. There is no issue with procuring vaccines and ensuring there are cost savings and insurance coverage for vaccine research. These aspects of H545 are not controversial. However, as H545 stands, this bill is highly irresponsible, and it also creates a liability shield and offers immunity to healthcare providers for immunization-caused adverse events. How can one offer a liability shield for a healthcare provider administering a product that holds risks and has caused injury, harm, and death without ensuring informed consent to patients? And there it is. Informed consent, ladies and gentlemen. That's what is missing in the bill, H545. It's not a bad bill. It's just that it's not complete. It was rushed through committee, and I hope, that the Senate will be able to fix this. Let's see. Bear with me a second here. Let's see. Vermont has existing informed consent laws, yet there is no standard process, training, or paperwork to guarantee that this critical practice of informed consent occurs. This was the entire point of the Burt Amendment. It balanced the transaction between provider and patient in H545 by guaranteeing informed consent. I supported the Burt Amendment, ladies and gentlemen. The Burt Amendment would have given us the informed consent that would have been what we needed to make the bill better. We need to stop with rushing these bills through. We need to have a better work product. And I managed to burn right through the first segment, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have to take this up in the next segment. You're listening to Right Side Up.
matching signs, or full-color vehicle graphics, the crew at Yipes have you covered with screen printing, embroidery, full vehicle wraps, and all your custom designs that make your logo stand out anywhere. And when it's time to take care of your ride, Yipes, Berry & Bevan & Sons is your go-to for remote car starters, spray-on bed liners, auto accessories, and general maintenance that keep your car fine-tuned and looking sharp. Yipes, Berry & Bevan & Sons. Local, creative, and ready to serve. Visit us at 439 North Main Street or give us a call at 802-479-0055.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. I want to get quickly back into discussion of the House Bill 545 and the Burt Amendment, because 545 still has the opportunity to be made better, because it is going to get time in the Senate. It'll get discussed, and hopefully when it passes out, if it passes out, it will have the Burt Amendment or some semblance of the wording in the Burt Amendment in it. The Burt Amendment required a process involving written information regarding benefits and risks of immunizations to be discussed between provider and patient. This can easily be a vaccine package insert, which contains the clinical research, trial research, and adverse events in Section 6, as mandated by federal law. It also included a disclosure statement for the patient to understand that the provider offering the immunizations was shielded from liability. Finally, the patient would sign a form or attesting that they received informed consent prior to their decision to refuse or accept the immunization. If immunity is offered to providers, then how is the patient protected or supported in this relationship? Currently, H545, they are not. This is deeply troubling, irresponsible, and unaccountable legislation. Now, I want to go back to a part of the article that I didn't include here. $5 billion, $530,623,153.83. This is the amount paid since 1988 to those who have been injured by or lost loved ones because of a vaccine. This is paid by the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, established by the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. All right, let me see here. I'm going to skip forward. This is not how you take care of the people of Vermont. The misinformed advice offered and the false narrative created around existing informed consent laws does not rectify the inherent inequity in H545. This is not partisan or political. It is about acknowledging the reality of vaccine injury and creating an opportunity for honest transparency and best possible outcomes for both parties. H545 does not pass the test. How many times have you been told vaccines are safe and effective? Do you receive informed consent at the doctors when you receive a vaccine? Do they explain the benefits and risks prior to administering vaccines? Are you told that flu vaccines have mercury, a known neurotoxin, in them? Let's look at the issues around Recombivavax, hepatitis B, and I know I messed that up, vaccine routinely given to babies on the first day of life. Recombivavax was licensed in 1986 by the Food and Drug Administration after pharmaceutical companies were granted immunity from any harms, death, and damage caused by their vaccines in the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. Yes, Big Pharma was shielded and has no liability for the safety of their vaccine products. No other product has this protection. First, genetically modified virus used in a vaccine contains 200 micrograms, I think that is, of aluminum, a known neurotoxin, at a level 14 times higher than the allowable amount of aluminum in intravenous perinatal nutrition for an 8-pound baby. Studied for 5 days with 147 children up to 10 years of age prior to licensure. October 12, 2017, Informed Consent Act Network sent a letter to HHS requesting the hepatitis B vaccine data. And there's all kinds of numbers here. January 18, 2018, received a letter from HHS and FDA which failed to provide further clinical trial safety data. 2 more letters were submitted requesting the safety data and ignored. Let's see, there's all kinds of information in this article list, ladies and gentlemen. FDA has refused to respond to further requested clinical trial data. On September 4, 2020, Informed Consent Action Network filed a petition to the FDA demanding that the licensure of the hepatitis B vaccines be revoked or suspended until their safety as required by law is determined in a properly designed clinical trial of sufficient duration. The point being, ladies and gentlemen, informed consent does nothing more than keep both sides safe. You want to have a vaccine, you want to have 100. That's your choice. But you deserve to be told the pros and the cons of what is in that syringe before you take it. So let me skip forward to more of this article here. There is a real reason the current vaccine schedule is being reevaluated. The Byrd Amendment was essential to complete the circle of justice and transparency. It offers a higher standard of health policy to be codified in statute. Also, you should meet Kaylee Lynn Matten, but sadly, she died at the age of 7 from myocarditis triggered by a Fluzone vaccine containing mercury at a wellness visit. Kaylee Lynn's mom, Nicole Matten, shared testimony in 2015 stating, quote, "I was not told that vaccines can cause injuries or death. I was only told that the shot would keep her healthy, but that was not the case," end quote. Quote, "Pediatricians are denying that these things happen, and if you ask me, doctors need to be better educated on adverse reactions of vaccines. They should also have to accept liability if the shot they give causes harm, if like it did for Kaylee Lynn." And I'm sorry if I messed that name up. "They would give better information if they had to be responsible for their recommendations," end quote. Quote, "Any and all vaccines should be subject to informed consent and full disclosure and exemptions. The right to say no should always be available." So let's see, since there is a risk. And this goes on. It's a really long. This article has got a lot of information in it, so I'm going to skip around here. Vermont needs informed consent laws with procedural requirements and substantive requirements. H545 should be remanded back to committee to fix the inequality that pervades this legislation. It is unfair to all Vermonters to let it pass as is. Now, I think the problem is this problem will need to be fixed in the Senate. Of note is that the American Academy of Pediatrics is being sued. Children's Health Defense filed suit on January 21, 2026, stating, quote, "This complaint is brought under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, 18 U.S.C. subsection 1962 C and D, against the American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP, for its central role in an enterprise that has defrauded American families about the safety of childhood vaccines scheduled for several decades." Now, I want to break from the article for a second here. If we need to understand, in a lot of things, we have what we call pattern recognition, right? If we have data, and we should be keeping data on all of these things, we know how many kids have been getting vaccines. We should know how many kids, or people in general, any of these vaccines, for a child or an adult. Why not keep a record so we can know where we are? Are we actually making people safer, or are we making them less safe? Why is that controversial? That's the question I have. Quote, the fraud set out herein after affects the U.S. childhood vaccine market, which one estimate puts at $15.08 billion in 2024. The vaccine schedule has expanded from 11 doses targeting 4 diseases in 1983 to over 72 doses targeting 18 diseases until recent action by the government discussed below. This expansion, dramatically accelerated after the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986 granted manufacturers immunity from liability, allowing unfettered growth of the childhood immunization schedule and transforming AAP into a co-beneficiary of the vaccine enterprise, end quote. Now, let's see. Legislators must fix H545 and demand a process to ensure a meaningful and substantial procedure for informed consent for all patients, especially if providers are receiving a liability shield for any harms caused by these products. Respectfully and gratefully, Allison Despathy. Now, I'm very curious. I'm sure there are many people out there who believe that the vaccines that they take are keeping them safe, and I guess for the most part, they must be, because we don't have a lot of people who would say that they were harmed. But shouldn't we know? If we have all of these visits, and it would be something just that a form could be filled out. Informed consent, so the doctor and the patient could discuss their treatment. And the patient could have more confidence in their own physician and in the product that the physician was administering. I completely agree with the author here. Informed consent keeps everybody safer. It doesn't hurt, it helps. It doesn't cause harm, it makes people safer. So why would we want to not have a vaccine schedule that would be only administered because a physician and his or her patient had a 5-minute discussion? Is it because the physicians are so rushed that they don't have the time, that they say they don't have the time to tell the patient about any possible side effects? Is it because the physician doesn't have the time to tell the patient about the ingredients that are in the vaccine that they're about to administer? I don't see why this should be a problem. We have so many records. I mean, I'm 62 years old. There are a lot of records of vaccines being administered since I was born. And I know many of you feel the same way. How many of you would like to have more information before you were to take a vaccine? Some of you, I'm sure, think that you don't need any more. But if there are people who would like more, why wouldn't we be willing to give them more information? I fail to see the harm. I fail to see how this makes people less safe, how this is going to slow the system down. Why would it be that this was so rushed? And this has nothing to do with the number of vaccines administered. Like I said, there's no mandates in this. The problem is the informed consent. If you want the vaccine, that's great. There's just the argument out there that says the patient and the doctor need to understand the patient's responsibilities and the doctor's responsibilities and what actually is in that vaccine that's about to be administered. So I hope I didn't beat that horse to dead, but that's one of the things. The question is, why would this have been rushed? We have so many things, like I discussed in the first segment, that really need to be addressed. Did this bill need to be rushed through in this session? So we've got to pay some more bills, ladies and gentlemen, so we will return shortly. You're listening to Right Side Up.
Did you know that not only do we specialize in everyday arrangements, but we also do weddings, events, and funerals? Give us a call at 802-476-3126. Email us at emsleytheflorist@gmail.com, or you can check out our profile on our website, emsleythefloristweddingday.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. Before we get back into our discussion, I just want to remind everybody, I think, for a couple weeks now, I've forgotten, rightside-up-radio@gmail.com if you'd like to drop us a line. If for some reason you can't catch us on WNTK Radio, you can go to WNTK.com, find the podcast button, click on it, and scroll down to Right Side Up. You can listen to any number of our shows any time of the day or night, and you can share them. You can find us on Podbean. You can find us on 802 Scoop Facebook. You can find us at 802 Scoop YouTube, and you can also find us on GraniteGrock.com. A couple more things. I want to plug a couple of events that some of our friends are having. You might want to check out. Number one is Children's Health Day at the Vermont State House, Tuesday, February 3rd. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on. There's some testimony that's going to be given at 10 o'clock by Mary Holland. There's between 11 and 1. There's cafeteria meet and greet, 1 p.m. There's a press conference, and between 2 and 3:30 there's an informational event. But Vermont Health Day at the Vermont State House, Tuesday, February 3rd. So you might want to put that on your calendar. Another thing you're going to want to try to put on your calendar is Vermont Federation of Republican Women are having a NASCAR event. They're having it, February 15th, 2026, between 2 and 6 p.m. at the Canadian Club in Barrie. It is actually, the address here says 414 East Montpelier Road, Barrie, Vermont. And it's sponsored by Vermont Federation of Republican Women. So you might want to check that out, especially if you are a NASCAR fan. There are tickets available if you go on, VFRW.net, and you could check it out. But I wanted to just make a couple of plugs for a few friends there. And I want to get into our next, it's another op-ed by another legislator, colleague of mine, Representative Gina Galfetti. This is appearing in Vermont Daily Chronicle, but I know in speaking with Gina this past week that this was going to be an op-ed appearing in a lot of both online news outlets and in print. Galfetti, include current use land in the 50 by 50 land conservation goals. This is from January 23rd, 2026, by Representative Gina Galfetti. Let's see, there's an editor's note here. Act 59, the state law to which Representative Galfetti refers, follows a United Nations land use initiative and was sponsored by Representative Amy Sheldon, Democrat Middlebury, chair of the House Environment Committee. That, ladies and gentlemen, by chance, is also the committee that I sit on. Okay, let's see. Vermont has committed itself to ambitious conservation goals through Act 59. The Community Resilience and Biodiversity Protection Act, often referred to as the state's 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 initiative. These goals aim to conserve 30% of Vermont's total land area by 2030 and 50% by 2050. Achieving these goals, however, will be impossible without recognizing and equitably including the very landowners who already steward much of the land's working landscape. More than 19,000 rural Vermont landowners participate in the Use Value Appraisal, UVA program, aka current use, enrolling approximately 2.5 million acres of agricultural and forest land. For decades, this program has kept land undeveloped, productive, and locally managed. It is, by any reasonable measure, Vermont's most successful conservation program. Yet under Act 59, these lands were largely excluded from the conserved land inventory, and the people who managed them were largely absent from the law's development. This omission matters. Act 59 envisions a forthcoming, quote, conservation plan that will rely heavily on private landowners, especially farmers and forest managers, to meet statewide conservation targets. But their goals for their land, the methods they've used to maintain it in an undeveloped state, the economic and regulatory pressures they face, and their conservation needs have not been equitably considered as Vermont moves into Phase 2 of implementation. House Bill 70, H70, offers a straightforward and sensible correction. It proposes adding land enrolled in the Use Value Appraisal program to the definition of, quote, conserved land in Act 59, specifically by recognizing UVA land as a natural resources management area. This change would acknowledge that working agricultural and forest lands managed under UVA already provide critical benefits for biodiversity, climate resilience, and community stability. Organizations representing rural and working land interest, including members of the Rural Caucus, professional logging contractors of the Northeast, the Vermont Farm Bureau, and the Vermont Forest Products Association, have asked that H70 receive meaningful consideration in the legislative process. Now, I want to break from the article for a minute here. In the first segment, ladies and gentlemen, I talked about how chairs of many of these committees, because they are not Republicans, because they have an agenda and they are going full steam ahead on their agenda, are not apt to want to take these bills, including H70, off the wall and bring them up for discussion, actual discussion and markup and consideration, and for a vote to put them out on the House floor. This is how the only way we're going to advance some of these bills is by you, ladies and gentlemen, and your friends and your family members who vote in this state, getting on your computer and sending a polite email to the chairs of these committees with these bills that I laid out through this entire program today, and tell them you want them to be considered. But we're going to need to get thousands of people mobilized, not 10 or 20, thousands. Otherwise, these bills are not going to be taken up for consideration. They are not going to be put forward, and all of these bills are going to need to be redrafted with new numbers next biennium after this coming election, because that's the way it's going to work. Every biennium, all the bills die that haven't been passed. So it's going to take you working in concert with us in the legislature to make some of these bills that you actually want to pass, to be discussed in committee, come out of committee, get discussion. It's going to be those emails, thousands of emails and phone calls and messages to the Sergeant at Arms that are going to make these bills move. Let's see. To date, that consideration has been cursory at best. And I can tell you, because that bill is pinned on the wall in our committee, the Environment Committee, it was just cursory at best. State agencies such as the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board and the Agency of Natural Resources have indicated that they will continue refining interpretations and guidelines for conservation categories under Act 59. That ongoing work is important, but is not a substitute for clear legislative intent. If Vermont is serious about collaboration, trust, and shared responsibility in conservation, then the statute itself should reflect the role of working lands and the people who steward them. And I agree wholeheartedly with Representative Galfetti here. Vermont's conservation future cannot be built by overlooking rural landowners or redefining conservation in ways that exclude long-standing, successful models. Recognizing UVA enrolled land through H70 is not about weakening conservation standards. It is about grounding them in reality, fairness, and partnership. If we want to meet our conservation goals, we must start by counting and listening to the land and landowners who have been conserving Vermont all along. Let's see. And that is, like I said, authored by Republican Gina Galfetti of Barry. So, and I agree with Representative Galfetti. This House Bill 70 needs to be taken up. It needs to be discussed in committee. We need to find a way to make current use land in H70 part of our conserved land. You know, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if we do that, then we've already reached the 30 by 30. If we do that, our 30 by 30 goal is actually, we blow right past it. We can not have to worry anymore. So that is one of the very good things about that H70. Now, if I can get my computer to work with me here, I'm going to bring up another one that, if I can do it quickly enough, I will tell you about a bill that just got introduced this week. And let's see if we can do it here. And let's try it here. Just bear with me one more minute here. See if we can get this. All right. All right. H767. All right. Now, this was just introduced this week. This is a bill that I introduced, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope it will also get consideration. H767. Conservation and development, climate change, air pollution. This is the subject. Conservation and development, climate change, air pollution, renewable energy, land conservation, Act 250, future land use maps, renewable energy standard, clean heat standard. Purpose of the bill is introduced. This bill proposes to pause multiple climate change related laws for 8 years. And you ask, why would I do that, ladies and gentlemen? Why would I propose a moratorium? As you know, the governor, and now he has a bill. I think the governor that his administration is proposing is H602. I stand to be corrected, but I think that is the bill number. H602 is looking to try to codify a lot of what was in 0625, which is the governor's executive order. There is pushback against the executive order, mostly with respect to wetlands and the buffer being reduced from 50 feet to 25 feet. Now, let me get back to this bill that I've proposed. Findings and purpose. The General Assembly finds 2023 Acts and Resolves number 59, which we just talked about, and 2024 Acts and Resolves number 181. Act 181, ladies and gentlemen, if you remember, is the so-called, what was it called? Reforms, Act 250 reforms. But it wasn't exactly reforms. It was more I and many people who I've talked to who own land, who are looking at some of these future land use maps, they're describing it more like a land grab. Act 181 basically thumbs its nose at rural Vermont, in my opinion. Let's see. Those acts and resolves have imposed regulatory burdens that may increase housing costs and limit development opportunities, infringing on private property rights by overriding individual landowners' decisions and local control. Number 2, Global Warming Solutions Act establishes emissions reduction targets that could lead to higher energy costs through mandated transitions to cleaner energy sources, restricting individual rights to choose affordable energy options, and violating private property rights through enforced compliance. So, what do you think? The Global Warming Solutions Act, ladies and gentlemen, we know the harms it's already done. Let's see if I can get through some more of these. Number 3, Renewable Energy Standard established in 30 VSA Chapter 89 requires utilities to procure increasing percentages of electricity from renewable sources, aiming for 100% by 2030 or 2035, depending on the utility, which may result in higher electricity rates and program costs for ratepayers, burdening individuals and property owners with unnecessary expenses. Now, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we've run out of time, but H767, you really might want to check it out, because if we're able to actually get the bill off the wall and get it considered, then maybe we can get a little bit of relief. So, like I said, we've come to the end of the show. Unfortunately, remember, ladies and gentlemen, I've given you a lot of homework this one. Please remember, stay safe, stay informed, listen to Right Side Up.